It's wonderful to have you all back here for this session. So, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Salam alaikum. It's lovely to have you here for the second session for the Qatar Climate Change Conference 2021. My name is Etna Traynor. I'm going to be your moderator for today. I'm a former international journalist and I'm based in Dubai. So for me, it's really special to be able to come to Qatar. So it's absolutely wonderful to be able to get on a plane and get straight back here instead of having to go halfway around the globe to come and see you. So lovely to see all the development here in the region. And as I say, I'm your moderator for this session. And you'll always hear me occasionally too on the Adaptation conference, on the podcasts as well, that I really, really thoroughly enjoy doing. We're going to be looking, of course, in this session to at climate change mitigation and adaptation here in Qatar. And already in that first session, we had some great discussion there of a lot of the efforts and energy that's happening at the moment in terms of making sure that countries and indeed that individuals and companies are really leading the way in terms of adaptation and, more importantly, mitigation of climate change. Now, here in the Gulf countries, especially Qatar and the smaller countries too, I think, the need to respond is absolutely huge. And, a country like this, a big player in the energy space, a lot that can be done here to really get effective and, more creative strategies as well. I think that's what we are hearing from everybody, that we need more creative strategies. It was also very special to hear His Excellency AlSada, and he's looking in good form. He still has that great energy and he has that great focus and dedication. I've probably interviewed him at every OPEC meeting over the last 20 years, and we still keep an eye on all the great work he's doing. So it's great to see him here, and hopefully we'll see him in person the next time. Now, we have a great panel of leaders who are going to join us here and really share their thoughts. Probably present a few questions, as we will all do in this conference. And we don't all have the answers yet, and as we heard in that first panel too, it might take us a little while longer. But everybody needs to work together and they need to work diligently. And our first guest is to speak at this session too, is the former Minister of Energy and Industry in Qatar. His Excellency Dr. Muhammad AlSada will join us in just a minute. And of course, he has great experience in the energy sector, more than 35 years indeed. And he played a very important role in leading the Qatari National Climate Change Committee in preparation of the Kyoto Protocol negotiation. So it's been at the heart of a lot of his work in energy for quite a while. He also, during his tenure, chaired the National Committee on Climate Change, and that was during his time there, 1995 to 1998. And also he played a significant role in the preparation of the initial National Communications Report for the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. So he's been extremely busy in his career. I've followed it throughout his time at OPEC. I've interviewed him several times, and I'm absolutely delighted to welcome him, please, to the stage, His Excellency Dr. Muhammad AlSada, the former Minister of Energy and Industry in Qatar. We're delighted to have him open this session for us.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and a very good morning to you all. Combating climate change is a global challenge bound to be acted upon globally. The wait-and-see option doesn't exist anymore. Despite pledges and efforts by the world organizations, CO2 emissions have increased by 60% since the UN Climate Change Convention was signed in 1992. The impact of climate change is felt all over the world, though geographically to varying degrees. The impact of climate change has manifested itself in various ways. Extreme heat events are reported to occur nearly 5 times as they did historically. The same story goes for fire, weather, droughts, heavy storms, and floodings. However, climate change impact are not necessarily catastrophic end of times. If the world respond to the environmental hazards collectively, The responsibility is certainly common, though differentiated depending on the capacities and developmental priorities of different countries. Successful climate change plans and policies can be achieved only if it considers if it is considered in the context of a comprehensive sustainable development strategies, taking into account the genuine long-term environment, social, and economic costs. For us in Qatar, combating climate change can capitalize on its strengths. Qatar has an unwavering commitment to environmental protection, evident in the pillars of Qatar's Vision 2030 and the subsequent strategies. The economic strength, the developed infrastructures, and the world-class academic and research capacities of its institutions, an example of which is where we are gathering today. The state of Qatar is stepping up its efforts in playing its part in fighting climate change, as the cabinet lately sanctioned an ambitious national climate change plan, which was prepared by almost 50 different Qatari entities. It contains 35 mitigation and more than 300 adaptation initiatives, which are also hugely catalyze, which can hugely catalyze and hasten the economic diversification being earnestly pursued by Qatar. Ladies and gentlemen, natural gas is the cleanest fossil fuel produced and exported by Qatar. Has been predominantly used in power generation, displacing coal, the most polluting fossil fuel, with 50% less CO2 emissions than that of coal. Natural gas will continue to play an essential role in the energy transition the world is pursuing, especially when it is coupled with carbon capture, utilization, and sequestration. In order to make more economic sense when cheaply available CO2 is utilized to produce high-value chemicals. In fighting the climate change, the other significant potential future role of Qatar can be the blue hydrogen production, since hydrogen is universally agreed to be an essential part of future energy mix, be it the elemental form of hydrogen, ammonia, or methanol, among other options. For this, successful factors for production of hydrogen, such as the huge natural gas reserves and operation experience, has been existing in Qatar for a number of decades now. This is being complemented by CO2 capture and storage, as well as controlling the possible fugitive methane. Ladies and gentlemen, with this, I conclude my speech, and thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much for those opening remarks, and lots to digest there and lots to talk about, which we will have an opportunity to go into detail there, to talk about natural gas, to talk about hydrogen, to talk about the great efforts that are going on here and how fast those efforts are going to need to move. I'm delighted now to welcome the Deputy CEO for the Qatar Free Zone Authority to the stage, Mr. Muhammad AlSada, I believe, is with us. So great to have him here. Of course, he oversees the business development of the authority and serves on many boards, and also previously worked in the Department of Finance. So I'm going to look forward to our conversation later. But thank you, sir, your opening remarks.
Hello, thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. We've been here all morning, and we've touched upon a lot of things around the climate and about climate policy. And I think, as I understood, one of the things that we wanted to also talk about is adaptation. And so, I sat down with our communications team and our marketing team and said, okay, so what is the Free Zone doing when it comes to adaptation? And of course, the first impression or the first idea is, we're building green buildings, and green buildings are important, and we're sustainable when it comes to water. When we have some allowance for rooftop solar. We're GSAS rated, and all of these things are very, very important. And it's not easy to do this, but it's also not very, very difficult. Now, but when it comes to adaptation, as I think His Excellency Abdullah Al-Atiyah mentioned this morning, a lot of this is really about risk and unknown. And we've already been surprised. And so all we know is that we will probably continue to be surprised going forward. And so when we think about adaptation, we also think beyond, what is the Free Zone doing as a free zone, as the built-up infrastructure. And we think, I'm sorry, this is another slide from our marketing team about all of the other green things that we do. But beyond the built infrastructure, it's also about what are we doing in the Free Zone as an economic development agency, as a way of building new economic activities within the country, which are at least not directly related and or are more independent from our existing fossil fuel or mineral fuel businesses. And it's not easy. It's quite difficult. Just as an example, these are our three main let's say sectors that we look at. But then we started thinking, okay, but what would be really challenging is thinking about how do you use all of the investments and ideas here that the country and that the Free Zone is doing and all of our partners are doing towards the enhancement of the built infrastructure, towards the management of the built infrastructure, and to kind of use that to develop new economic clusters which are not only diversified from the mineral sector, but also are sustainable and or clean in and of themselves. And so, we tried to do this, and we worked quite hard with a lot of with Muwasalat, with Ashghal, with Kahramat, with the Ministry of Transport. And one of the first things that we were able to do was to begin to develop an electric mobility cluster. So right now, again, based on the big demand for electric vehicles from the public transport sector, from Qatar Airways, from the ports, and across the country, we already have our first electric vehicle manufacturer operating within the Free Zone. We have a number of others, including Yutong and Inventus, who are building their facilities for electric buses, for batteries, and we expect to make a few more announcements in the next few weeks and months around building up the entire e-mobility ecosystem within Qatar. Now, so this is, it's again one step. So we started with the buildings, then we started talking about economic diversification. This is now, one cluster which is clean, but this is still not adaptation because, again, there's a lot of surprises. We don't know what's going to happen. We don't know how big this cluster may or may not be, whether it will succeed, whether it will not succeed. And so to move beyond that, we've also started to look at other important clusters which are also very much targeting the initiatives that Qatar are doing and the Free Zone are doing around sustainability and carbon and the reduction of carbon emissions. So whether it's related to cloud services and AI, which plays an important role in building management and systems management and in optimization. Things around mobility, advanced mobility, so beyond electric, also looking at autonomous and different modes of transport. Can we use the sidewalk for delivery? How about in-building deliveries and all of these things? We're also looking at a sustainability cluster. We have a number of announcements here that hopefully we'll make in the next week or two around companies that are really delivering innovative solutions in the greenhouse offset or in the energy efficiency space. And finally, even in the field of sustainable food production, whether it's with some of the announcement we made recently alternative meat products, or cell-based meat products, or even the partnerships that we have with the other government agencies on more sustainable ways of producing food, technology to reduce water consumption, and so forth. The point here is that we don't know how much of this will work in the long run. We know that these are all important steps that we are taking now, and that working very closely with the government, right? All of this is only possible because of the institutional framework and the demand across the country that's driving the demand for these products. But ultimately, in order to think about adaptation, we really have to think about really diversifying this pool of potential clusters and economic clusters, and really thinking about how this will evolve, how these economic activities will evolve in the face of change, whether it's from the climate or from economic considerations. And so when we think about adaptation as the free zones, this is if you will, the whole framework that we use to think about this. And I think that's all I have to say. So thanks a lot.
Thank you so much, Ms. Nadam. We will, again, delve into some of those topics deeper, but innovative, creative thinking there on behalf of the Qatar Free Zones Authority. Lots going on when you look at logistics, technology, chemicals, and really expanding that. And I think the food security, we're going to be hearing a lot more about that in the region too, but great to see it already happening here when it comes to the great work you're doing at the Free Zones. And they're looking very well too. The whole build is looking very exciting, and I think you've employed lots of new technology and very, very different ways of doing things, so that's very exciting, because I'm sure it'll only get better from here on. Now, our next speaker is the Sustainability Director at Qatar Foundation, and I'm absolutely delighted he's with us here. Dr. Sued Khalifa Al-Thani joins us now. He is also, of course, an adjunct professor at the Hamad bin Khalifa University and a proactive sustainability leader with more than 16 years of experience in corporate ecosystems. So he's well-versed on the SDGs, and he's going to talk to us now. I'm delighted he's here with us. Wonderful. Thank you so much for being with us. And then stay with us afterwards. Thank you.
So thank you for being with us today. So before I start my presentation, I have to highlight one thing. We gathered all people today. We wanted them to work together. We have entities coming from different sectors. But what has Qatar Foundation did itself? We're not only limited to be an academic or research entities. Before you ask people to have an action regarding climate change, you have to start from your own house. So this presentation will cover some of the climate change mitigation and adaptation actions brief for Qatar Foundation. It's obvious from the title that when you talk about actions, you're talking about two topics, the mitigations and the adaptations. So when it comes to the mitigations, Qatar Foundation follow the normal route for mitigation, which first step is actually to know where you're standing. So you start with the measure, then you try the second phase to think about how you're going to do the reduction, and at the end, you aim it for the offset. So when it comes to measure, on a regular basis, Qatar Foundation measure its carbon footprint and publish on an annual basis the Qatar Foundation greenhouse emissions baseline inventory study. So this is for the year 2019. The chart actually show you how much energy how much carbon we have offset from different sectors or different parts of Qatar operations. So the main purpose of this is actually to monitor the carbon emission from the education city, so we know where we stand. And after that, we publish this report, which is actually, we disclose it at a later stage with international entities. When it comes to the reductions, on a regular basis, Qatar Foundation does do carbon audits for many of its buildings to understand their performance and where it can be improved. At the same time, we are actually working with internally or externally with entities to improve some of the buildings by following, for example, building sustainability operation, like lead operation and maintenance, which is not exactly a new built building, it's actually building being operated And we want to understand if this actually does match its expectation or not, and ways to improve it. So in this case, we have been working with the Supreme Committee of Delivery and Legacy to get the building QNCC Elite certification. So it's a continuous effort on reducing the emissions coming from operation. And also, we try to improve the way people behave by involving the end users of the building, the occupant, and the operators. When it comes to offset, there's many ways of offset. We actually do follow many ways on offsetting some of the carbon, like buying credit internationally from from developing countries. But other ways, actually, we want to invest some of our money internally. We do have existing facility for solar panels in plants in the education city, but we also thought about future project, how we can increase this. So the aim of this application is not limited only to having a new project within the education city, but as an entity that's leading in education and academic research, you want to have the opportunity to have something on ground where people can study and understand something exactly tailored for Qatar. So this is some of the existing project. I think the green and blue, the blue project is the existing project, and we have the red ones that potentially new project coming in the coming few years. So this was the first part of our work. When it comes to the mitigation, when we started doing the mitigation data collection for the mitigation, we found out there's a lot of issues. When it comes to Doha. We're following, in this case, we're following the greenhouse gases protocol and collecting data, and it's 3 stages, so direct and indirect emissions. But when we're collecting the data, we have been doing it manually, so it takes a lot of time and effort to collect this data. So the next step, we have proposed an idea with Hamad bin Khalifa University to, you already know the source of the data. All you have to do, find a way, and you have all the information tailored for Qatar. All you need to do is use a digital platform to do the work on your behalf. So as an organization, we want to be one of the leading organizations internally to do such a work, and after that, maybe we can work with government or other entities to implement it on other organizations. So the main aim of the platform is to collect the data, has information tailored for Qatar, and can be distributed maybe in the future to other organizations within the country or at a national level. So the second part of the presentation is talking about adaptation. So when it comes to adaptation, as Qatar Foundation, it has been evaluating the 3 main risks for the adaptation, which is heavy rain and flood, extreme temperature, destructive storms. So we always started, there's some of the report we issues relating to Qatar Foundation climate change risk, opportunity and assessment. So we assessed the current stage of annually we assess the city and we try to predict what's going to happen and how we can improve it as an adaptation strategy. And then we have the climate change adaptation option, development and plan. So to propose idea for improvement. And we haven't been only working internally. Inside as an organization, Qatar Foundation, we actually did reach out internationally. So we have been working with the Climate Neutral Now, part of the United Nations, UNFCCC. We have been working with the Global Alliance Building and Construction Global ABC and Digital Building Identity. We have been also we have disclosed some of results of our carbon performance in the Carbon Disclosure Project, and we rated as non-industrial sector a grade B, which is considered to be the highest, second highest in the Middle East, and above the Asian and the global average. So we actually do work internationally. So part also of the climate change is actually doesn't stop at doing the mitigation and adaptation. It's actually one of the main ideas is actually knowledge sharing. Knowledge sharing can be as effective as implementing some of the strategies of climate change. So when it comes to the implementation, you have to, when it comes to engagement and communication, we have first the Qatar Climate Change Conference, and the other part is the Qatar Climate Change Knowledge Board. So the aim of the conference is to save Qatar industry and public and policymaker on climate change preparation and enhancement, to support Qatar climate change global leadership through the climate change knowledge sharing and cooperation, to mitigate climate change risk and implication of Qatar and contribute to Qatar's sustainable development. The knowledge port is actually a port that will be in Qatar Foundation website. Main purpose of this port is creating Qatar tailored climate change information, education, and knowledge sharing for the public. So this is give you an idea some of the effort we have done internally, and we're looking for effort from other organizations as well. And thank you very much.
Thank you so much. And yes, thank you for staying with us. I would now like to invite our two earlier speakers back up to the stage, and then we'll welcome our virtual guests. So Mr. Abdullah Al-Misnad, if you can join us here, and please sit beside Dr. Sood. And also His Excellency Dr. Muhammad AlSada will join us as well. So we have our two virtual guests joining us as well. So let me welcome them. And they're going to pop up on that screen any minute. I'm convinced they are. We have two special guests, the Executive Director of European Roundtable on Climate Change and Sustainable Transaction. Lovely to see you there, Mr. Andrei Marcu. Lovely to see you. Thanks for being with us. And also, I'm delighted to welcome James Grabert. I believe James is also with us, the Director of Mitigation for UNFCCC. Is James here as well? There he is. So we've got everybody in place. Wonderful. James, thank you so much too, and we will get into the great work that both of you are doing in a moment. But if I might just start with His Excellency AlSada first to bring us back to, I suppose, you gave us some indication what's going on here, in Qatar. You talked about the plan that's in place. But, we heard from the UN Secretary General not too long ago, talk about that climate change is really moving at a fast pace, faster indeed than we are. And we really have to listen to the science here. Do you think we need to see more ambition, more action, against the threat of climate change, and particularly what's going on here in Qatar, Your Excellency?
Thank you very much. Indeed, the whole world needs stronger actions. Any actions to be taken, I think, unless it is regarded to be part of the sustainable development and the pillars of the sustainable development, i.e., you will see that priorities of different countries is dictated by the most pressing issues. So nothing should be at the expense of each other. You need to secure the development. You need to secure the economic development. You need to secure the social needs of different regions and countries. At the same time, you need to protect the environment. I think science are telling us that these three pillars can go hand in hand, and they cannot be at the expense of each other's. A lot of innovations are required in this, to this effect. The cooperation between different parties are badly required, and you need to involve all stakeholders. And to me, stakeholders are everybody. I can't see any member of this planet or any entity at all that is not part of being a stakeholder. So the only thing is that we should act differently because of our different rules. Governments, for example, has a powerful tool to plan and implement things which are positively affecting the climate change and the adaptation towards the climate change. The private sector, with its investment might, to be directed to more of eco-friendly projects, and we can see the expansion of eco-friendly projects and businesses worldwide which are not serving the climate change and the environment, but also at the same time augmenting and boosting the economy. You have also the civic society. They are the people working in the media, research, all intellectuals as well as media. They are the shaper of the society inclinations and opinion. You need the support of the society by having all these stakeholders aligned themselves towards protecting the environment. And after all, the individuals, the indivisible, the blocking, building a block of all of that. We can be, if you like, the intellectuals, the fathers, and the CEOs. They are the one which we should be focused on and raise the awareness of.
Indeed, I think we're hearing that from everybody this morning. Again, it's got to be a greater effort by everybody involved. Andre, if I can bring you in here. When we think about mitigation, I mean, it's about cutting greenhouse gas emissions. But again, it's not just good enough on its own. Adaptation in terms of building resilience to climate change is also essential. How can Europe actually help empower other countries and some of the examples you have there?
Well, thank you very much for inviting me. It's been, it'd be nice to be in the Gulf. I haven't been there in 2 years, but
we miss you. Yes, the next time we'll have you in person.
Either is the bigger or the smaller country, doesn't matter. We miss coming to the Gulf. Look, I think the real question is I mean, the question that you put in here is what is the role of different actors. And I think they all, as the previous speaker mentioned, all the actors have a very important role, but they all have their own role. And the government's role that is being seen in the EU is to set up the local commitment, the international commitment, and take action. They take action in their own way. But what's important is to create a framework for the other actors to interact and the other actors to take action in the case of the EU, because EU is an example, it's not the only example in the world. In the case of the EU, they have set an emission trading scheme with carbon prices, which is now moving the agenda. But there are many other pieces of legislation that have to act in concert with this particular thing. But at the same time, they must realize that they're part of the international community, and Europe moves as the rest of the world moves, even if he wants to be a leader. Now, the one thing that has been mentioned and is very important is in the framework the government sets, is that this transition has got to be sustainable. Sustainability means that your social, economic, and environmental agenda moves in a harmonious way. Otherwise, something gets out of sync, and then you're going to have enormous stress in society. We're beginning to see just the understanding in society of what this change means. I'm not going to refer to the yellow vest, the Gilets jaunes movement in France, because that's now too much of a if you want, a repetitive statement. But nevertheless, they're a symptom. And as such, we need to bring all society along. This is got to be a rational conversation among intellectuals, among people that are in industry, people are in finance, civil society. This cannot be an adversarial discussion. It is an adversarial discussion at some point, with some people making it into an adversarial discussion, which is unnecessary. Because finance also has an important role to play. They have the role of directing streams of money to new areas.
Yes.
But they also have an obligation to ensure resilience. Industry has to take advantage of these new opportunities, but it also needs to stay competitiveness, because this transition requires prosperity. The purpose of the exercise is to make the transition, not to become poorer in the process of taking that transition. So it is a very historical, unique moment in society where all actors have to come together. Europe has moved ahead of others. Europe has put in place a number of instruments, but it is just now that we're beginning to see actually this trickling down to the population. The extension of the emission trading system, the proposed extension of the emission trading system to buildings and transportation is a super controversial issue in Central and Eastern Europe, in the European Parliament, because of this huge societal and social impact. So these are kind of the things that you need to take into account. Now, the realities of Qatar are different than the realities of Europe, but nevertheless, plus ça change, plus c'est la même chose. There are similarities and the lessons to be learned, and I'm sure that our friends in Qatar are watching with great interest what is being done, what are the things that are being in place, and the cooperation between the EU and GCC is a very good one in this area. Thank you.
And it needs to continue, absolutely. But again, it is about making sure that we get down to action now. And it's not about a blame game, really. It's about making sure we find the solution and we move perhaps a little bit faster. James Grabbert. James, if I can bring you in, please, when we look at the work at the United Nations Framework Convention on climate change, a lot going on there. But do you get the feeling sometimes, or do you often feel maybe a little bit frustrated in terms of we seem to be constantly playing catch up in terms of we have the science, we know what's going on, bring us up to date in terms of what's going on with UNFCCC.
Okay, thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here, everyone. Let me first make the point that we do indeed have a global blueprint for how we should address climate change. And this blueprint is the Paris Agreement. Under that agreement, every country, including Qatar, have a legal obligation to develop the National Climate Action Plans, or the NDCs, as we call them. They define how the country will meet its Paris Agreement target, basically to keep global warming below 2 degrees, ideally to 1.5 degrees Celsius. So in practical terms, it's about achieving net zero emissions at the latest by 2050, and hopefully with 50% emission reductions already achieved by 2030. That's what the science is telling us. Additionally, we have the National Adaptation Plans, which are the main international instrument for adaptation planning and implementation to address the risk that we're confronted with climate change. So it's not a question of if, but how are we going to do this? When we look at how countries around the world go about this task, and there are some common points that we are already seeing. First, climate change is becoming integrated in every policy and investment decision. It's no longer possible to be climate blind and run an efficient government or business or even your household. Every decision maker must have an obligation to plan and report on climate impacts of their decisions. Secondly, engage the power of the economies. Few policies are so effective in defining behaviors as economic policies. Yes. For this reason, many countries, indeed, in the Paris Agreement itself, promote different forms of market-based measures and carbon pricing. This is a tool that's also readily available for Qatar to use. Thirdly, public awareness and information. We heard a little bit about that already earlier by some of our speakers. The only way that people will be able to support and respond to climate measures in a positive way is if they understand what is happening, why it is happening, and what their own role is in both causing and solving this crisis. Education, training, public information is therefore fundamental to successfully implement mitigation and adaptation actions. And we are seeing this. As I said, we've heard from some of the speakers today. Qatar is doing already many of these things. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And we've lots more that we'll talk about. Abdullah, when we look at industrial zones and the importance of industrial zones, and indeed the importance of developing economies in that, bringing new industry in, and particularly, I think, the drive to bring in more manufacturing and to bring in more high-tech industry in here. How do we encourage investment, while at the same time insisting on emissions reductions? What do you think, Abdullah?
So I mean, there's no conflict between economic development and environmental considerations.
No conflict.
No.
Good. Well, that's good to hear. Sorry, your microphone is maybe just a little quiet.
Hello.
Yeah, they're good.
So there's no conflict between the two. It's so there's lots of things that you can do to either think about what kinds of industry are you bringing in, how do those industries interact with the environment, and then how do they mitigate and potentially reduce that impact. I mean, here in Qatar, even within our free zones, we don't really look at the kind of heavy polluting industries. A lot of what we do is of a low environmental impact by its nature. And then what we try to do also is to think about, it's the selection of the industries, but also to think about the different programs, and we have a number of them that we're putting in place that allow the companies to better understand their environmental footprint, mainly through energy use or otherwise, and to give them the tools to help them reduce and or offset their environmental footprint, while also looking at how we're giving them the energy. So mainly using the national grid, which is already, which is taking a lot of steps to reduce its carbon footprint, both at the network level and even within the zones themselves.
And again, I think that's so important, as you say, that we look at economic development in reframed, sort of making sure that it is environmental development at the same time, keeping both. Dr. Stewart, when we look at the work of the Qatar Foundation, you talked there about the Global Alliance and the international engagement, and you've always said that this is the place that you're committed to having those difficult conversations. But when we look practically, I mean, what can Qatar actually deliver as an example to other players?
I think when you talk about Qatar, at this point, we have to think that we have the chance to be ahead of many countries. And I think maybe His Excellency Dr. Muhammad AlSada can confirm this. For the next 15 years to the year 2035, a lot of countries have to switch from the use of polluting sources to something more cleaner. And when they talk about something clearer, they might be talking about renewable energies, they might be talking about biofuels, but really what they're talking about, the easiest option is actually going for natural gas. So Qatar does have that advance. You're already using a cleaner source of energy. But that doesn't mean that we have to be very much relaxed. Maybe what we should be doing is being ahead of many countries by trying to switch if we have this advance, maybe we have to switch to renewable energy at this stage, or at least have a big part of our energy switched to renewable energies. So this is one of the advances of Qatar. But what we also do have, it's a good example, is actually having, as you said, you have all the right combinations. You have government support. You also have a lot of advanced organization, even at the level of the GCC. You didn't get this. You have Qatar Foundation. Qatar Foundation has so many research entities, has so many academic bodies. They have universities. So this is one of our advances. In general, also, there's a big interest from the oil and gas sector to be part of this. So when it comes to Qatar, you have to there's more to it. But so far, what I can see, it just somebody had to get all these people working together
Yes.
to get the right result.
Your Excellency AlSada, talking about oil and gas, and he just segues it nicely in there. When we look at Qatar, a major player, particularly in gas and LNG, and you talked there earlier about, gas being, the cleanest fuel, natural gas. But also, we cannot turn the taps off yet, so to speak. I mean, we need, and I think particularly during the last, during the pandemic, we saw that we have to maintain the hydrocarbons that are there right now. We have to do it in a better way. But talk to us about the shift that you've seen over the years, the shift in the narrative, the shift in the attitude, and also, what companies can do. How do we manage, I suppose, this two-tier approach in making sure that we power the world right now while making the transition?
The transition, to me, is not what many people can think. We are moving totally from a situation to the other, but it goes through, if you like, phases. And if we look at the history, human being has been adding different source of energy, but never have extracted one or dropped one. So we always, because humanity needs them all, but what we need to do is to manage the different types of resources or energy resources in such a manner that it doesn't affect or harm the environment. But I cannot see or envisage that one form of energy can be dropped altogether. But you can say you can produce gas safely and in an environmentally acceptable manner, that you equipped yourself with CCUs and sequestrate all CO2 and use the gas for a wider range of products like hydrogen, and hydrogen is a very big trend now. Those countries who announced net zero carbon emissions, they embedded hydrogen as a pillar in their energy transition. Now, one cannot imagine, as of today, any cheaper, more available hydrogen than that which can be produced from natural gas. In fact, to date, more than, I would say, 75% of all hydrogen produced in the world is coming from natural gas, methane in particular. So you can expand this sector and use it, because hydrogen is totally safe, and the production, result of using this form of energy is water. You cannot have anything safer than water for the environment. But you need to be cautious of your operations. You need to develop through research a safe disposal, because you don't want to incur any harm to the geology. You have to take care of the possibility of methane, fugitive gas of methane. All of that can be tackled through research and development, especially if the world focus on such things.
Now, James, if I can come back to you and talk about the nationally determined contributions. And in the last year or so, many countries actually submitted updated NDCs, but perhaps many didn't as well. And this involves a lot of costs, it involves a lot of effort. And, has the pandemic set back countries in terms of their commitment to NDCs, or what more can countries do? What do you see, what do you want to happen?
So yeah, with the pandemic, I think there were cases where probably things were delayed beyond what we would have liked or envisioned in terms of the process. But I think we're coming back up to speed. We have numerous submissions have come in, updated submissions, new submissions. We'll be producing in just a short time, a couple of weeks from now, the second part of the synthesis of the NDCs, and that's being going to feed into the Glasgow conference to give a message of what more needs to be done, where does ambition have to be. So I think we have a wealth of information in that context, and the parties are doing their best to live up to their commitments in terms of submitting these required NDCs. But what's more important is what we're seeing in those NDCs. And if I may jump in on this conversation on Qatar and the transition. I mean, in Qatar's NDC, it actually, I won't quote it all, but it clearly says very clearly that the economy depends on the oil and gas sector, large portion of the GDP. At the same time, it's also a large part of the domestic greenhouse gases. And there's a clear acknowledgement of that. And the narrative goes on it's about the balance, as we're hearing, of economic stability and environmental sustainability if we're going to have long-term success in dealing with mitigating climate change in the context of Qatar. and it's about the transition to this more sustainable economy without jeopardizing the economic prosperity. And then there are the actual facts that Qatar is also vulnerable to sea level rise, temperature increases, heat exhaustion, all kinds of concerns as well on the adaptation side. So in terms of what they're saying and they're already doing is taking this transition. It's not just about transitioning away from the gas, from fossil fuels. It's about transitioning to a broader economy. In the context of Qatar, they are clearly linked. You can't just not change what it is you do and simply move away from the fossil fuels. So they have been quite successful in growing their economy in terms of activities around education, healthcare, science, and technology. This is all happening. So, and it's happening with a vision that is longer term, and I think that's key. And what we're seeing is a great. We need more of this long-term planning and investment pathways for moving, not just the shorter-term commitments and NDCs, but how they're really affecting the investments, affecting the change in the case of countries like Qatar, the economic structure, so that they can continue to be quite successful and maintain the standard of living and all these things. So we're seeing that successfully done. Part of what they're doing, as I said, is looking at hydrogen. Yes, it's blue hydrogen for now. But what about renewables? A lot of countries have moved in the space. China and Denmark, Morocco have really embraced the alternative means of energy and built successfully thriving industries. So I hope Qatar will be looking towards green hydrogen and how to couple this vision they have with renewable energy overall. So I'm quite pleased to see what's happening. I think there's a lot of opportunities coming out of that. But to your question, yes, we're seeing bits and pieces in all these NDCs. We need more. Clearly, we need more. Yes, the COVID crisis has put a damper both in terms of, I think, not just the submission of the NDCs, but the actual policies behind them and the efforts that countries can make. There's been a lot of focus on, needing to recover from COVID, obviously. So undoubtedly, it's had some impact on the impetus countries have been able to put towards fighting climate change. Thank you.
Thank you. And, in fact, when we look at the whole economy that has to recover around the world from COVID, and Abdullah, we look particularly at the work in, the movement of industry here. When you were with the Ministry of Finance on the infrastructure side, looking at the budget there, I'm just curious how much attention is put into sustainability when we look at, bigger budgets like that on the government level. And also, how concerned are your investors and within the Free Zones Authority really examining now the role of ESG and its importance for everybody to move to the next step?
So I won't speak for the Ministry of Finance.
No. I'm just the fact that you're familiar with budgeting, but just in general. No. I don't want to bring you back.
But I'll tell you this: that investors are, there's a clear commitment from many agencies in the country towards a transition to, especially to electric mobility. So we've seen this firmly across the board. We've seen, the public transport sector taking a firm step towards electric mobility. We've seen major players like the port, the airport, the public infrastructure work. So there's a lot of real investment that's happening in at least one area which I'm familiar with is around electric mobility. And we've seen investors react very positively to this. We have a number of investors throughout the electric mobility and electrification chain, all the way from batteries to charging manufacturers to vehicle assemblies, and so that's, I guess, it's a real commitment, and it's been a very positive reaction. And so these guys are coming, they're putting their manufacturing facilities, their development centers, their testing centers here. And I really think this is one area where there could be the beginning of a longer-term economic cluster. It addresses some of the points that have been mentioned all morning around the need to develop specialized products for our specific environment, which is basically, check all the boxes. It's high humidity, high dust, high heat, all at the same time. I don't think this will. We see this continuing ahead, especially now with the continued commitments to Paris, to the Paris Accords, and going forward. And so, and I think this is an important factor, because without this institutional cover, and it's not just about the budgets. It's not about the size of the check. It's about the ability or the desire to procure or purchase these kinds of solutions. And I think these things are very important, because it gives the private sector a framework against which to operate and plan their own investments as well.
Indeed, there's so much that we have to talk about, and our hour is almost up. Andre, if I can come back to you here, and one thing you briefly mentioned there, we have to look at finance and investment, and people are doing a lot, but there's still a lot more that can be done. And perhaps wrap it up in terms of, talk to this one for me too, in terms of your closing, I suppose, comments on this. How can the climate change sort of transition risks, can they be absolutely turned into opportunities? And I think we see it somewhere. But what's happening perhaps in Europe that can also be transferable here? We'll get some sound in a minute. Did you go on mute?
Sorry, it's me. Yeah,
you're saving energy.
It's the classic. No, it's the classic one. Is you please unmute yourself, or you muted yourself. This is the new thing that we've learned over the last 2 years. I apologize for this. What I was saying is that Europe has put in place the European Green Deal and this Fit for 55 package that has come out on the 14th of July. Finance is an important element, because in the end, we need to direct finance to new areas that would be sustainable and would be resilient. And this has been expressed to the taxonomy. And taxonomy really is a way, you can look at it in many, many ways, but it is a way of looking, of defining what's sustainable. And there are certain standards, and there's reporting that's going on. It's an enormous area. It's a world on its own. And something that Europe has been a leader, but now is being developed in many, many other countries. The question is going to be, are we going to have a couple of questions? One of them, are we going to have a more global approach, meaning that are we going to have different taxonomies in different countries? Are we going to be able to, what more important, is taxonomy a yes or a no? Because this is the big issue in Europe, and this is something that people should think, because why? Qatar, gas is important to Qatar. And the question is it black or white? Because if you put certain standards of taxonomy, the way in many cases is being proposed in Europe, you may end up with large swaths of the economy being no, and a very small part of it being yes. And the question is, where is gas? And this is become a really important problem. Is gas part of the project that are being developed, projects that are being financed? Because the world is not black and white, the world is a transition. And this taxonomy, this financial language that defines what's sustainable, has to take into account this transition period, has to recognize the fact that everybody wants to get better, but we have to work to get there, and it doesn't happen overnight. So this is important for Qatar, for instance. It would be extremely important to understand how the financial taxonomy in Europe is developed, what is the role of gas, to what degree, like everybody else, I think they have a right to intervene and make their views heard. Also, the same thing happened, and it related to finance, it's related to new technologies, is hydrogen. Jim has mentioned the green hydrogen. And yes, we're all going to get to the green hydrogen, but before we get to the green, we have to get to hydrogen. And we believe also that the blue hydrogen is a period of transition, that we want to build the infrastructure around it. We want to build a new economy around hydrogen. And this is where a country like Qatar can play a very important role in directing flows of finance in the places that are realistic for it, in the places of developing hydrogen technology, in developing CCS, developing storage capacity, building storage capacity, and it has the finances, it can develop the technology, can acquire the technology to become a superpower in this. Small as it may be, it can be a superpower in certain areas. We've seen many countries do that. I know that time is short, so I'll stop here.
Okay, well, thank you again for that too. And I think it's one area we all need to be really looking at is that investment in it. Dr. Seward, if I can, and we do have to wrap this up, I'm afraid. We have another panel to come yet, and we have another speaker. So very quickly, looking at the work in education you're doing, looking at that visibility, and we've heard that from a few people this morning. Can Qatar Foundation really lead that to bring people into, I think, that awareness that hopefully will turn into strong policy here?
Okay, so one of our aims of this conference is to raise awareness, yes, but the leading of this has to be the Council of Ministers. So the Council of Ministers is the one who gather on everybody, and as you heard about their plan, recently was announced that they have around maybe 15 organizations in Qatar involved. One of them is Qatar Foundation. So we are working closely with them, and this effort is also led by the Ministry of Municipality and Environment. When it comes to awareness as mentioned by the other host is not that simple because it doesn't translate directly into actions. So we have to find a way how we can change that. But when it comes to the role of Qatar Foundation of raising awareness, as we said, we have the institutions, so many of them, and we do have this conference and other portals, and we're working on it. And we have so many sustainable related events, so this is part of our work. But it is not a job of one organization, it's actually a whole country effort.
Indeed, and it has to stay there. And in that Council of Ministers National Climate Plan, they also, and Abdullah, perhaps you can look at that, economic diversification was one of the areas that they really said there's going to be a lot more attention to. You talk about, in the industrial zones, Abdullah, you talk about agri-tech, you're talking about the electric car, all of that. Are you beginning to see more economic diversification in terms of a lot of the new ideas and a sense of entrepreneurship, I suppose, coming into the country?
Yeah, no, definitely we've seen lots of new ideas coming, not just from outside, not just coming into the country, but also coming, coming out of existing businessmen and existing entrepreneurs. So I think people are interested in the space. They are moving. A lot of our projects, a lot of our most innovative projects are actually, have partners or are proposed by local businessmen, and so, or in partnership, either by themselves or in partnership with international companies. So there has been, I think, there's an appetite for this. People are looking for something to do, but also, again, they're looking for a clear guidance and clear understanding of where the country is going. As you know, these things can be risky without this kind of overall vision.
Your Excellency AlSada, when we look at the national vision, the QMV 2030, there are 4 pillars really: human, social, economic, and environment. Do you think we've got it right here, and are we moving on each one of them fast enough? Just in closing remarks.
Qatar is trying to balance these pillars, nothing to come at the expense of the other. And as recent as 2 weeks ago, Qatari cabinet approved a plan, which is this climate change plan has been prepared bottom up. So a wider range of entities, up to 50 different entities were involved so that everybody buys into the plan. And the plan here is very important and ambitious because, first of all, it's stated the way Qatar will implement the plan. The process indicates that this time as wide a range of entities involved in the preparation as possible. The combination of the mitigation and the adaptation in one single strategic plan is very important because while mitigation serve the abating CO2 emission and absorbing CO2 and other greenhouse gases, adaptation augments our resilience to changes, but all of it serves the same purpose. So Qatar chose to have one single coherent plan to serve both the mitigation and the adaptation. Basically, these initiatives is to generate many different, if you like, projects, numerous projects. These projects are very much dominated by eco-friendly projects and services. Again, these are opportunities to me. So it is an opportunity to enlarge the economy while, if you like, serving the environment concurrently.
And indeed, good luck to everybody working here on the agenda, because I think there is a lot to be done. It's an exciting time in Qatar. James Grabant, as we head to COP26 and we get ready for Glasgow, it's only a few short weeks actually at the moment here. Are you optimistic? Just close us out with some words of wisdom, I hope.
Yeah, I would say I'm quite optimistic. I mean, unfortunately, I think that the pain we've all been through in the last year and a half or 2 years globally has made us reflective. It's led us to build a greater trust, to work together, to build the solidarity that's needed, to understand we can tackle things. And that's what we need in climate change. And I'm really looking forward to this new optimism coming out of Glasgow. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And we do have to leave this session, this part of our session here. So once again, James Grabber, thank you so much. Andre Martiu, thank you for your input. Dr. Suad Al-Thani, thank you so much. Mr. Abdullah Al-Misnad, and of course, Your Excellency, Dr. Muhammad AlSada. Thank you all for your great input and your words of wisdom there. I know we probably delivered a few more questions than answers, but that's good. This is about keeping the dialogue moving, and it's about, as you say, keeping everybody involved. Once again, thank you so much. Thank you. Now, we will have another break in just a few minutes, so we're going to take care of you. The hospitality people are doing a very good job, but stay with us for just a few minutes. We're going to hear now from Dr. Sami Al-Ghamdi. He is professor at the College of Science and Engineering at Hamad bin Khalifa University. So, Dr. Sami, I believe you're here. I'm really looking forward to your presentation and again, looking at what we have, reflecting on what we did earlier today, and we look forward to hearing from you. Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Thank you everyone for the chance to listen to some of the research activities that we do here at HBKU. We sponsor in HBKU homegrown research dedicated to climate change, and I will be happy today to share with you some of those projects that we're working on. So to start with, I will start with the IPCC framework for risk, and as all of you know, that risk imposed mainly by climate change for natural hazard, and the disaster will impact a development, and that development will respond back with sometimes greenhouse emissions, and the loop will continue. So at HBKU, what we work on to make that development sustainable and make it resilient, so that make the nexus of risk, resilient, sustainability. Sometimes those concepts, they don't work together. For example, sustainability sometimes does not mean resiliency, and resiliency does not mean sustainability, meaning that in resiliency sometimes we need abundance of resources, while in sustainability we need efficiency, high efficiency to be able to run sustainable systems. Taking this concept and apply it in Qatar as a framework for all of the research activities that we do at HBKU, we can see that any disturbance or natural hazard that imposed to the society, we have a few layers of protection that protect the society from those hazards. The first set of protection come from institutional capacity, strong government and entities, economic resources, and quick risk communications horizontally and vertically within the government and the society element. The second set of layers is that resiliency characteristics, how your systems or your society is integrative, how is it, let's say, has resources, how it is responsive, how it's flexible, etc. And here in HBKU, we have one project that focuses on those layers of protection for the society. We're actually trying to measure the readiness of different entities, public and private, in terms of being ready to respond to climate change or any natural hazard. Now, there is two sets of infrastructure that usually impacted by climate change. The first set of infrastructure is the healthcare infrastructure, how the healthcare system operates, how the healthcare can respond and coordinate effort quickly to respond to any natural hazard. And the second set of infrastructure is the physical infrastructure. And within the physical infrastructure, we have different layers. We have communication and transportation, we have the built environment, and we have electricity and water production. And as you can see from this figure here, we have interdependency between those layers. If you don't have electricity, people cannot live easily in their houses, especially in a hot environment like Qatar. You cannot put gas in your car because there is no electricity for the gas station. And this interdependency is need to be incorporated in our framework. So as a final output from our work, what we are trying to do is design tools and metrics that can aid decision makers, policy planners, to be able to assess the entire system and be able to respond quickly. Now, as you can see here, we have a lot of stakeholders, end users that involved. They are every one of them working sometimes independently or collaboratively with other entities trying to be prepared for climate change. And those entities supported by strong governmental central agencies or entities that coordinate that effort. And we have a lot of initiatives at national level, local level, that all try to address important issues that face the society, and climate change, one of those most important elements. Now, let's see how the research work, how academia can help the government and the industry and the whole society. So we launched a few projects, research projects, focused on the entirety of this framework. The first project that we are working in collaboration with MIT from the United States to try to produce high quality or high resolution climatic data for Qatar that can enable the rest of the system to work. So healthcare, physical infrastructure, they can be able to use those data that can be produced locally here in Qatar in collaboration with MIT. The second project is in a collaboration with Wiley Cornell Medicine, Ministry of Public Health, and Hamad Medical Corporation. We are working to identify the impact of climate change on vector-borne diseases, public health in general, communicable diseases. And this is a big project that covers the entire state of Qatar. And then we have other collaboration with other organizations like Siberian Committee, Ministry of Interior, Civil Defense, and Kahrama and Marafiq, in terms of exchanging the data, exchanging the experience, and providing the result that we have. And we are continuously launching new initiatives, like this year we are introducing a new collaboration with the University of Maryland and UCL for their expertise. The main goal of this is trying to transfer knowledge, to bring knowledge from outside to inside Qatar and sponsor homegrown research on climate change, because this is very important for us here in Qatar Foundation and HBKU. Now, let me try to introduce to you quickly 3 projects that we do that focus on climate change as just an example of some of the projects that we do here at HBKU. The first project that we did is a project that focuses on season characterizations in the Arabian Peninsula. We have studies 70 years from 1950s to the 1990s over 12 climatic parameters, and we try to investigate how is the season characteristic is happening in the Arabian Peninsula. Interesting enough that we found that during the past 70 years, especially last 30 years, there is a significant shift in season characteristics. So we have expanding in summer, we have shrinking in the winter, and the fall, the spring is changing. So in a few days or maybe a week or a half, you will hear in the newspapers here in Qatar that fall officially start. And regular people will ask you, but we feel the summer is still there. Actually, the public is right. As a scientist, we can confirm that the fall is switching and it's changing over the past 30 years. This is one of the projects that we work on, okay? The second project that we work on is focusing on water availability in the MENA region. Now, all of you know that we are poor in water resources, we have problems in water resources, yet climate change is intensifying these problems. So according to this research, we proved that a significant increase in temperature will cause a great deficit in terms of water balance and water availability within the MENA region, which intensify some of the problems that we're already facing. Now, the third project that we are working on, this is very interesting because most of the people who's not very familiar with climate change will ask you, what is all this conference about? We hear from IPCC that the temperature will rise by 1.1 Celsius or maybe 2 Celsius. So what's the big deal? It's just 2 Celsius. But see, this work that we've done in HPKU is very interesting. As you can see, the maps here around the world, is divided by IPCC to 44 regions. Okay. So what we did exactly, we investigated the increase in temperature per zone. And interesting enough that we find that in some scenarios that the temperature will increase by 12 Celsius in some region of the world. And 12 Celsius is a huge number. It's not easy for you to adopt. Built environment, buildings, let's say, even the healthcare system is not easy to cope with this huge increase in 12 Celsius. This is in some regions. During the days, also there is huge increases in some regions, about 7 to 8 Celsius degrees. So this is very important to look to the problems. Yes, we share all a global vision, but we need to focus on a regional and much more lower scale to be able to prepare. So when we invest in mitigation measures, we really need to know how much we need to invest, okay, to make sure that we are coping with climate change. So those 3 projects is finishing the side of understanding climate change. Here is another set of projects that we work in terms of adaptation or try to cope with climate change. The first set of projects that we work on built environment, buildings, trying to prepare our buildings for the future, for climate change. Decarbonization of building is a very important issue. Just one example, in Qatar here we rely entirely on desalination, meaning that the concrete in buildings made out of desalinated water, and the desalinated water has a lot of carbon emission embedded in it during desalination. So decarbonization is one of the issues that we work on, trying to find ways to cut carbon emissions, embedded carbon emissions in construction materials, and also during operation. So for example, this figure here shows you, this is the months, this is the time per day, and this is the month of the year. And you can see in the reference year, or 2020, the extreme temperature is actually just like 2 months of the year, okay, in some time of the day, like during noon. But if you look to 2080, is the entire month. It will be extremely hot for the AC system to be able to cope with it. And this is one of the projects that we are working with, like with companies like Qatar Cool or Marafiq for central cooling, or for even individual buildings, how you can cope with HVAC system requirement in the future. We are experimenting a lot of new technologies, like for example, green facades. How those embedded in the environment, if built environment can help mitigate or cope with climate change. Now, not all the technologies that are available worldwide can be implemented in Qatar, and not everything in Qatar can be implemented worldwide. This needs to be done in a local scale. Second set of projects that we are working on is expanding to the built environment. So we are expanding to the transportation network and metro networks. And as you notice that in the built environment, we have a concern about temperatures. For larger built environment like urban development, we care a lot about rainfalls, okay? And it's a really serious problem. Even if you're prepared for it, intensive and sudden natural hazard is unpredicted if we don't study that and be prepared for it. So one of the projects that we are working on, we are analyzing Doha highway networks, and with one goal in mind, which is mega sport events. So Qatar is a hub for many events that are coming in the way. So this is one of the collaborations that we do with the Superior Committee. What if we have a mega sport event and we have a rainfall? Are we prepared for that? And to what level? So we, as engineers, we can go design any scenarios that we want. So we go extreme. We see what will happen in the worst case scenario. Also, we expand our work to the metro stations, and metro is much more complicated compared to the highway networks, because it's really connected to each other, and it's dependent on other systems, like, as I mentioned, like electricity production, for example. Now, the last project that we are working on, the project that I mentioned, is with Ministry of Public Health and Wiley Cornell Medicine, and in this project we are focusing on public health communicable diseases. So as you know, that vector, like mosquitoes, they are heavily, let's say, affected by climatic conditions like temperature, humidity, rainfalls. And that will impact their life cycle and their ability to transfer some disease. So we're working on malaria, we're working on dengue fever, chikungunya, some of those communicable diseases that can be sparked or break out by mosquitoes in response to climate change, okay? And we are focusing also on influx of migrants here in Qatar. So what happened outside of Qatar can transfer quickly, and we see what happened in COVID. So this is what we are working on, analyzing the data of migrant workers that come to Qatar, and the spark of malaria or trends of malaria transmissions, and the relationship to climate change. This is all from my side. Thank you so much. As you can see, we discussed today a lot of things, and there's a lot of players in the field. There's many people that are trying to do the same thing. A lot of coordination is needed between all those entities. I would like to conclude by thanking QNRF and HBKU for their generous support. Without their funding within QF, we will not be able to achieve all this. And my collaborator from around the world that really help us to transfer knowledge from outside Qatar to inside Qatar to have like some ground research related to climate change. Thank you so much. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you. Okay. Dr. Sami, thank you so much. And you can see there the tremendous work that HBKU is doing. And again, I think that great work too that very much informs and engages with industry, with the media, bringing education together, making sure that academia is playing its role, particularly in terms of research. So, Dr. Sami, well done, and thank you so much for bringing us up to date with the great work that's happening there. So, just as we reflect on our final panel too, I think we saw there in that last panel the work that's going on in the European Union, and I think the cooperation that's happening right across the world in terms of some of the advances that the European Union has already made and how they can share here with the experience that are going on here. Also, what we heard also from UNFCCC there, I think again, complimenting Qatar too very much on the work that has been going on here. And I think on the tremendous efforts, the political will, and that great commitment that's coming from government, from the companies, and from everybody involved to make sure that you're doing what you need to be doing. And again, maybe a little encouragement there, coming from James too, to maybe push it a little bit faster. But I think we're hearing that from everybody right across the board. The Qatar Foundation continue, of course, to make sure that they're going to be at the very forefront, particularly, I think, in terms of what Dr. Saud said there, in terms of education and awareness, and really making sure that we facilitate and bring people together here for the dialogue, for the different conversations, for the difficult conversations as well, but really getting people committed, and I think, once again, getting everybody on board. And from the Free Zones Authority, I think we also look at the great work that is happening there, the industries that are being encouraged to set up here in Qatar, the industries that are already there, and I think that commitment that we're beginning to hear from them. And of course, as always, it was wonderful to hear from His Excellency Dr. Muhammad AlSada talking to us and bringing that great depth of knowledge in terms of the energy sector, in terms of hydrocarbons, in terms of his work on climate change, bringing all of that together to really bring a very, very practical discussion to this agenda here, to make sure that I think we're all looking at what needs to be done, what has been done so far, and again, with that great cooperation, and I think with a united spirit and a commitment coming from all of you, government, industry, policymakers, bringing academia, bringing everybody together here. This is where the country, and indeed this is where each and every one of you can make a huge difference. So we have a big challenge on our hands, but I think it's being managed, and we all have to continue to, I think, step up and make sure that we do our bit to mitigate climate change, one of the biggest challenges, I think, of our time, and particularly for the energy sector and indeed for this country. So that wraps up our morning session. We're going to take a break now, and as I say, our hospitality, they're looking after us very well here. We do have a lunch break. I'd love you to come back here at 12:55 because we're going to start on the dot at 1 o'clock, so give yourself a minute or two to come back. On the dot 1 o'clock, we're going to be looking at carbon market pricing. And this is something, of course, that's gaining in popularity around the world, something that has to actually be in there as part of the SDGs as well, to really the effective and efficient buying and selling of carbon permits and credits, making a huge difference. So my colleague Naweed Jabarkil will be back here, and at 1 o'clock we have a great panel and really talking about, bringing the economics of this whole situation to play too, and how it's playing out in some countries, and indeed how we can make sure to be part of it here in Qatar. So that's it from the morning session from Stephen Cole and myself. So thank you all very much. We'll see you outside, have time to network. It's great people are here in person. And we'll see you back here in less than half an hour. Thank you so much.